All right, guys, it's Brandon at Vet Titans, and I'm going to break this down because I promised I'd teach you guys this. I promised it's its own episode. I'm going to basically explain the common sense secret to what Ayrton Senna did when he drove. And basically, if you're a proficient drifter and you also understand basic physics, you would understand why Ayrton Senna did what he did. So first I'm going to show you the clip. That's a regular guy, that's somebody else. Somebody else. Somebody else. Now this is Senna. Listen. Okay, so he wasn't the only one who did that. Michael Schumacher could also do it. So do you guys want to learn why he was doing what he was doing? Okay. Formula One car has a wing on the front. Formula One car has a wing on the back. The steeper those wings are, the more aerodynamic resistance to the Formula One car, which means it's slower in the straights. Okay. So hypothetically, if you wanted to have the best of both worlds and you were an exceptional driver, what you would do is you would have the back wing remain somewhat steep, but you would have the front wing not that steep at all. And you say, but Brandon, I thought he liked a loose car. Loose is fast. Right, well, you gotta understand something. It was a manual transmission, 1,000 horsepower, twin turbo car. Okay, so there's plenty of power to dislodge the back tires, right? So if you limit the wing force in the front and you come in to the turn, you can get the back end to unhook first instead of the front by having a rear brake biased braking system. So that's the first thing to understand. So what happens is the back end starts to step out, and the moment that you let off the brake again a little bit, you have more downforce on the back of the car than the front of the car, as well as more weight on the back of the car than the front of the car because the engine's in the back. And so all of a sudden that back end reglues. So you basically changed your trajectory by, 10 degrees in the blink of an eye when that back end starts to kick out, and you let back off the brake, and there you are. Now, in addition to letting back off the brake, you can also get back on the throttle, okay? And you can, on a long sweeper, which is what this is, so watch it again now that you know what you're looking for. Everybody else is smooth and steady on the throttle, okay? Now watch, and remember, these are mechanical diff cars. He's using the throttle blips of the 1,000 horsepower car to dislodge the back end while he's getting back on the throttle. The other guys, if they get back on the throttle, the car pushes because it's too soon in the turn. But Ayrton Senna knew that he could counteract the push by tapping the brakes or simply just blipping the throttle. So he would play a game with the car where he would tap, 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 and he would tap dance on those pedals around the turns, and he would unsettle the car. Now think about when, and again, I'm not trying to talk shit about the guys anywhere at any training racing series, racing class anywhere, but everybody will tell you don't unsettle the car. When you grew up driving in a drifting state and you understand that when cars start to push, how to get them to stop pushing by unsettling the back end, by blipping the throttle, blipping the brake, blipping the throttle, blipping the brake, and getting back on the throttle. You don't have to use the brake. You can just blip the throttle, push, suction, pressure, suction, vacuum, pressure, vacuum, pressure, vacuum. That alone will usually dislodge the back tires. So anyhow, okay, so now I want to show you something else. And this guy, I am going to make this motherfucker, I'm going to give him all the attention he wants. We're going to make this motherfucker famous.
Channel. It was actually the Alonso video which kind of kicked things off. You will notice that all of the drivers use quite a similar driving style. Like, pretty much exactly the same. They are very smooth coming off the brakes. Then one sweep of the steering wheel into the corner. and then out of the corner, and smooth on the throttle again. That's it. All of them do it from Lewis through to Nikita. Mostly. So what's going on? Drivers used to be wrestling the cars, using mad throttle or braking techniques, or even creating a bucket load of understeer deliberately, as Alonso did for a while. And Senna was the perfect example. Undeniably rapid, but with violent steering inputs, smashing the throttle on and off, as well as sliding the car, having it move around a lot of the time. Now, I have broken down a lot of different drivers' driving styles on this channel. It was actually the Alonso video which kind of kicked things off for Driver 61. He would drive in a deliberately horrible style, inducing massive understeer, heating up the famously hard-wearing Michelins to give them enough grip on the exit of the corner. Then there's Schumacher. He drove the car very hard into the corner and rotated it mid-corner. This meant he was actually slower mid-corner, but he more than made up for it on the entry and with a brilliant exit. But now, if you look at Verstappen versus Hamilton, the way they drive the car is remarkably similar. Honestly, go watch some of the onboards. After this, of course, I would love to include them on this channel, but we're not allowed. So what's up with that? Have they just cracked the secret to driving quickly? Or is it the cars that means everyone drives quite similarly now? Well, let's look back at Senna. Over his time in Formula One, he drove a lot of different cars, all of which needed driving completely differently. So he always needed to adapt his driving style to the car in question. And it's quite a collection of cars. Starting in 1984, he drove the Tolman, which was at the beginning of the turbo era. Then throughout his time in F1, there were cars through the changes from ground effect, driver aids, turbos and gearbox changes from H-pattern to paddle shift. That is a big change to get used to. And each of these cars required very different driving styles, particularly the turbos. So Senna was famous for his throttle technique. He used to stamp on the throttle, blipping it throughout the entire corner. Of course, if you did this in today's car, you would be straight in the barrier. Also, imagine doing this with the new ERS system. The deploy would have no idea what's going on. But Senna did this because of the engine. The majority of the car's power was only available when the turbo was spooled up, a bit like an Escort Cosworth or something with lots of turbo lag. So Senna was just using this weird throttle technique to keep the boost pressure up, so that when he did get on the throttle properly coming out of the corner, his turbo was producing more boost than the competitors. Very clever that, and it must have been incredibly hard to do, but of course, he was Ayrton Senna. But one of the main differences between then and now is grip. The cars had a lot of power and comparatively less grip. Really, you have to think about this as a ratio. It's like the difference between a supercar and a Formula 3 car or something like that. What I mean is that in a car with less power compared to grip, you drive a rounded arc through the corner. This is so you can keep the minimum corner speed as high as possible and use all of that grip. But if you're in something with more power compared to the grip, a supercar is actually a great example of this. Loads of power, but still uses road tyres and doesn't tend to have too much aero. You will take less of a smooth arc through the corner and more of a V-shape. This means you can get the car in a straight line as soon as possible. And this helps you get on the power and exit the corner faster. But what you see from Senna and Schumacher and a load of drivers from back then was them driving the car into the corner hard, rotating it with a brute force kind of approach, then getting on the power as soon as possible. Now, I'm not comparing a modern supercar to an older F1 car, but the power to grip ratio is certainly closer in the older F1.
I can only listen to so much of this guy's shit. Like, he's so off base, but there was one thing in there that he said which was crucial. Ayrton would go straight into the wall if he tried that in today's cars. And what he doesn't understand is, because he, like everyone else, is too fucking stupid. Like, I'm really sick to my stomach. It makes me furious that I'm on a planet and you guys are all so fucking stupid. What he doesn't understand is, that's how Ayrton died, is he went straight into the wall. So what changed? The mdiff. And he's correct. Ayrton Senna's driving style doesn't work on mdiff cars, which are what's used today. So all the other shit that he's talking about is total bullshit distraction. He doesn't actually understand what it's like to drive a mechanical diff Formula One car because he's never fucking driven one. He himself has only driven e-diff F1 cars, okay? It disgusts me that people who are in the industry don't understand the difference between a mechanical diff Formula One car and an e-diff Formula One car. If you guys wanted to make Formula One interesting again, you would go back to mechanical diff Formula One cars. And believe me when I say, if Ayrton Senna was alive today and you could create a mechanical diff car with everything else apples to apples as what these guys are driving, Ayrton Senna would smoke them, okay? It has nothing to do with trying to heat up the front tires, okay? Don't get me wrong, you gotta get your tires warm. It has to do with the fact that and the other thing he got right was he said there's minimal downforce on the cars back then compared to today. Correct. Especially on the front of the car. There's much more downforce in the front of the car because they got this biplane, triplane, quadplane thing going on, whereas back then they didn't. So again, I'm going to say this. Back then, the cars would push if you tried to go through the turn as fast as Ayrton Senna was going through the turns. So the way that Ayrton Senna would get around the turn is he would step the back end out in increments. He was like doing an octagon, bink, 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 like the teeth of a saw. He kept kicking the back end out just a little bit and then letting the car recover, kicking the back end out a little bit and letting it recover. And it would recover because he had more downforce on the back than he had on the front. And he had more weight on the back than he had on the front. And he was accelerating, which was transferring the weight to the rear of the car. This guy doesn't get it, but he at least points out the fact that in today's cars, Ayrton Senna would go straight into the wall, and that is correct, because today's cars are e-diff cars. And what happened was no one explained to Ayrton that had he stayed in a mechanical diff car, he would actually be faster than the e-diff cars. Ayrton Senna trusted his team. He trusted mindless fucks like this guy that they know what they're talking about. And Ayrton Senna believed that the e-diff was the future. Instead of say, get that thing the fuck out of this car and let me drive. And that's why Ayrton Senna's dead. You want to continue to hear this bullshit? Let's continue to hear his bullshit.
Cars to a supercar than it is to today's F1 cars. Then there is the suspension. Back in the 80s and 90s, the cars were incredibly rigid to get the floor as consistent with the ground as possible, meaning that the airflow under the floor was more consistent and you could get more downforce. But this rock-solid suspension setup didn't make the cars very compliant, so that meant they were pretty lively on the track, and especially so when bouncing over curbs or uneven tracks. Then there were the tires. Now,
correct, and that was a no-brainer because you don't want the car to be compliant with the track. You want it to vibrate and get squirrely because you're going to use that squirreliness to your advantage. If it was too compliant, now you've lost your downforce underneath the car, and you can no longer kick out the back easily around the bumps. The bumps are to your advantage if you know how to drive. Continue, fuckface.
We have done a video on all the ways that tyres have changed in Formula One. But in short, race tyres back then were harder and so offered less grip. It also meant that the drivers didn't have to tiptoe on them. So driving the car in hard, rotating it mid-corner and having oversteer on the exit didn't hurt the tyres quite so much. And of course, if you did this in today's cars...
Correct. And again, they did that because otherwise the car would get too much grip, you wouldn't be able to unsettle the back, and you would push straight off the road, and you would overheat the tires faster, which is what General Motors is learning. Sticky tires means they overheat too fast and you end up blowing them. So those tires back then, if you use that compound today, Ayrton Senna could go more laps without pitting versus Hamilton and all these other guys. So Ayrton Senna would smoke these guys. What I have a problem with is that this guy genuinely thinks that Ayrton Senna would lose against Lewis Hamilton and these other guys because it's a lost art and no one has the fucking IQ to understand it. Continue, fuckface.
You could say goodbye to a set of softs in about 3 laps. But all of this ragged driving made Formula One look absolutely awesome. Like they're right on the edge. A lot of what was so impressive in Senna's qualifying laps was how active he was, driving right on the limit of grip, right to the limits of the track. And yes, drivers are going a lot faster now. but it just doesn't look like it. I've been lucky enough to drive a fair few 80s and 90s F1 cars. They're incredible fun. They feel pure, ragged, and like you're always quite close to having a big crash. You are naturally more aggressive on the steering as the cars are less well refined. It's basically a bit more difficult to drive them. But generally, the fastest way to get around the circuit is to have the car rotated quite quickly in the middle of the corner. However, if you drive with this more aggressive style in a modern car, it simply wouldn't like it, and you'd be pretty slow. The latest F1 car that I've driven is a 2012. I'm still waiting for the call from Mercedes. And the development, the refinement is really obvious. And because of that refinement, because the car is so good, the old aggressive style just doesn't make sense. And so if drivers drove like this today, it would leave them seconds off the pace, not to mention wearing out their tyres very quickly. So why do they all adopt this same style? Well, in terms of steering, braking and acceleration inputs, they all need to do the same thing because of the cars. The suspension is so sorted. The cars are so finely tuned that they are stable for the aero platform, whilst also being able to deal with the curbs and the undulations in the circuit. The balance the cars have now is honestly remarkable. This means that the load through each tyre is really balanced. The aero works best as the ride height is really stable, and bumps on the circuit don't do a whole lot to upset the car. And as grip has increased more than power has, it means that driving a smoother arc through the corner is quicker. So rather than being off the corner, the drivers take a racing line closer to what you would draw with a compass. We call this the geometric line. And this all means that the drivers are very smooth. The corner is a constant blend coming off.
The cars make less power now than they did back then. Okay? Again, I'm going to make this guy famous because his arrogance, the beginning of this is cut off, but he still has it in type, but the beginning he's got it cut off. I got to find the original one where he's like, Ayrton Senna wouldn't be competitive today. You want to take a fucking 2x4 to his fucking face. Want to fucking take a 2x4.
Off the brakes smoothly, introducing steering lock smoothly, and getting on the power smoothly. And another difference now is the telemetry and data. The lines the drivers take.
See, he mentions everything under the sun, but not the mdiff. These people are low IQ pieces of shit. Low IQ fucking pieces of shit. I don't want to hear anymore. Because he
will be backed up by loads and loads of data, not to mention simulations at the factory. Practice sessions allowing them to drive, then go and check the data, then go again and work on how they drive the car. Whereas Senna and Schumacher, although they had some data, but not as much as now, were relying on their feel. What feels faster through a corner and over a lap.
Attention homeowners, get a brand new roof starting.
Okay, so again, he's going to be in the documentary. That clip will be in the documentary. I'm going to find the original one where he said Ayrton Senna wouldn't be competitive today. We're going to humiliate the living fuck out of this douchebag. At first time I saw that, I wanted to vomit. But don't get me wrong, he has tidbits in there that are true, and those tidbits in there that are true, he just doesn't understand it all revolves around the mdiff versus mdiff. See ya.